Okay, so this is General Biology, Bio131. We're doing Chapter 7, the evolution. And the last time we talked about the bioinformatics and what does it mean in evolution. And I mentioned that bioinformatics is you get the genetic data and you put it through the computer and you get some analysis and information. We call that bioinformatics. And this is how we discovered the closeness of these different species. Chimpanzee versus humans, gorilla, and the old world monkey. These are the similarities. How did we do that? Bioinformatics. We get the genetic data of each one of those. We got the DNA information. We feed it into that computer, and it gives us this analysis, and then we can compare and match the DNA of different species so we know how close they are. Now we're talking about the population. What's the definition of the population? And population is the units of evolution. I mentioned Tuesday that natural selection happened in individuals, but evolution happened in population. Do we still remember this? Like, this person is acquiring something, genetic changes happened, and he will be naturally selected as a person, but we don't call him evoluted as a person. He is naturally selected as part of the population that's going to change. So natural selection act on individuals, while evolution act on population. And what's the definition of population? Population is a group of individuals on this, of the same species living in the same place at the same time. Okay? Group of individuals, same species, same place, same time. Other than that, you do not call it a population. So here are different populations. Birds, these are same population. Okay, they are similar to each other. They live in the same area. They live in at the same time. Fish is a population. Squirrel is a population, and so on. Now, if we're talking about members of a population, so let's say we're talking about fish population. Fish is a population, right? So if we're talking about fish population, if I collected the genes, all genes of different types, all versions from individuals in that population, I will call that the gene pool. So what's the gene pool? It's all versions of all genes of all individuals. Okay? All versions of all genes of all individuals. And I put all of this together, that will be the gene pool. And even that gene pool can change due to mutation. So there can be some gene variation that goes with time. So I have this gene pool that I collected. Even this gene pool can be changed or can have more varieties or variations due to mutation that happen. Add to that, if this population is reproducing sexually, that will even add more. And we talked about this before, that because of that random mix of the chromosomes in the sexual reproduction, remember this, meiosis and mitosis. So we talked about this, and during meiosis there are something like crossovers and all that stuff that happen that will lead to even more diverse population. The gene pool that we just talked about, natural selection work on that gene pool. What do we mean by that? That gene pool is not going to stay constant. There are some changes that will happen to the gene pool. Okay, so it's going to change time after time after time. That gene pool is going to change because of the natural selection. So traits that enhance survival and reproduction. Remember this, survival and reproduction, not just survival. Meaning If you are powerful enough to survive, we don't call that natural selection as part of the evolution. You will survive, but if you don't reproduce and if you don't produce offsprings, that does not count as a natural selection as part of the evolution. So you have two criteria here: survival and reproduction. Is that clear? So if something happened to you because of the environment, and that was not translated into the genes, was not translated into reproduction, you are going to be affected, and when you die, it's over. Okay? So this doesn't count. We have to fulfill both criteria. What's going to happen is the evolution, as we see, it's happening over long period of time. We're talking about thousands of years. But it doesn't change all of a sudden, obviously. It takes thousands of years, so it's going to happen as microevolution. So this generation will have certain traits, right? The next generation is not going to be completely different, just a little bit of a change, okay? So next generation, less, you take part of the gene pool, less of the traits that does not support survival, and more of the traits that does support survival. So this is a little bit of a change. And then the next generation, you're going to do another microevolution. So microevolution after microevolution after microevolution, generation after generation after generation after generation. So if you look at this, 5,000 years, you will see this evolution as something big. You got from this monkey to this chimpanzee. This takes thousands of years. But did it happen all of a sudden like this? No, each generation a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, until you have the actual evolution. So remember that evolution happened as microevolution, which is generation after generation. From generation to generation is microevolution. So if you look at this example, see how the change is very minor. If you compare this, you have 9 here. It's just an example to clarify. You have 9, and you have 6 of the 9 that have blue, okay? And 2 of them are different. These have mutation, and this mutation turned out to be a good mutation. We were talking about an example here in these rabbits, and we talked about it before in the bacteria. Do you remember those few bacteria that somehow have a mutation that enable them to resist the antibiotics? Do you remember those? So this is beneficial. When I say beneficial, I'm saying beneficial to them. Okay, not to us. So if those two have a beneficial mutation, something happened to this, and that benefit them. And what do we mean by beneficial mutation? We mean a mutation that's beneficial to them for their survival and adaptation to the environment. So this generation, we have 2 of those mutated. Next generation, it will become only 3, not a huge change, right? And you go to the next generation, it's 4, and so on. At certain time, like what happened to the bacteria, it doesn't happen all of a sudden. Not like actually the antibiotics used for hundreds of years. How did these bacteria become, like most of it, become resistant like this? It starts with a couple of those, few. And then those died, and those few that have the mutation that are bacteria resistant started to reproduce because the mutation is happening in the genes, right? So the next generation, this become more, and the regular type become less. Next generation, the mutated type become more. Why it's becoming more? Because they had a beneficial mutation, right? That enabled them to survive. And so it will be like a gradual replacement of the population. Did you get this point? And you always have to remember, it has to be both together. If you're acquiring a trait or a character that enable you to survive and make you easy to adapt to the environment, that's not enough. It's not enough. It will help you only. It doesn't count toward natural selection and evolution. It has to be coded on the genes. Did you understand? Somebody was asking last time, so like if we're working in hot environment and we're getting darker, so that will go to the next generation. No, it will not. It will go only if it is coded. If you are exercising and your muscles become bigger, okay, that will help you to do your job and it will make you survive more, but only you. Unless it is coded on the genes, this will be picked as a natural selection and it will affect the population, the evolution. Is that point clear? Okay. So we mentioned that if you remember from the very beginning, we said life and domains and all that stuff until you come to the species, right? So here you have two different species, lions and tigers. Okay, each one of those is a species. Okay, but if you mix those two, like if you just in the wild in the forest, they will not come close to each other. But if you put both of them in one cage or something, one of them is male and the other one is female, they can actually have sexual interaction, and if that's the case, they will produce something that they call it liger, lion tiger, liger. It's a mix. Okay, so here's a question for you. Does this liger count as a species?
No.
Yes, no, yes, no. It doesn't count. I mean, if you think about it, you say, yes, why not? Why not? It doesn't count as a species because it's, first of all, you made that species. That's one. The other thing is they are not going to reproduce. For species to say it's a species, they have to reproduce. You're making something that will die and that's it. That doesn't count. Okay? So it does not count. So what species means, the exact translation is appearance, but it's not only appearance, okay? It's just where the name came from. So species is coming from a Latin word that means appearance, okay? But this is not enough, meaning you can have two things that look like each other, very close. And if I ask you, are these, like, look at those two. The eastern and the western meadowlark. If I ask you those two, do you think these are the same species? Of course you'll say yes, obviously, right? Look at this. Don't those two look exactly like each other? Very close, right? So if I ask you, are these the same species? Yeah, it looks like each other. No, it's not enough. It's not enough. So even though they look very close to each other, but they live in different habitats and they do not interbreed. If you put this male of the eastern one with the western one, they are not going to interact with each other. So, but this is not the only reason. Do we understand that? I called liger. Is that a species? No, it's not enough. It's different factors together. You have to put multiple things together and you call it a species. Number one, they have to be able to interbreed. So liger are a species? No, this is one. Okay. Number two, different habitats. If they live in the same habitat, this will it's still not a species, but it will add another point. So interbreed is one. Similar habitat is one, and the third one is reproduction. Can they reproduce or not? Is this clear? One of those is not enough to say species. They look like each other, not enough. They live in the same habitat, not enough. They reproduce, yes. You have to have the three combined. Is this point clear? So don't tell me, they can interbreed, they are species. No, the three combined. You have to fulfill the three criteria combined. Is that point clear? Look at those on the other hand. They look different, right?
Yeah,
But it is the same. Why? Because in the same habitat, they can interbreed and they can reproduce. Why not? Okay? So do not count on the look. Because this eastern and western are completely different species. Even though they look very close to each other. So it's very important to look at reproduction. Okay, like in the case of the liger, this is an issue. This is an issue that they found. Like they found it interesting. Why don't we like get a horse and a donkey and they interbreed? Are they going to interbreed if you lock them in a cage or in the same room? They will. But the issue is whatever is produced is sterile. It's not fertile. Okay, so it will not continue. So it is not a species. It doesn't count. Liger is not a species. It's something that you created, and it's not going to reproduce. It's sterile. So this is the problem that happened when you mix two species together. Okay, if it happened, we didn't see it. But if it happened that they interbreed two species and they produce a species, and this species were able to reproduce generation after generation, we can call it a species, but so far it doesn't happen. So the rule is, if you mix two species, when they interbreed, they produce an infertile or sterile outcome. Okay, whatever is produced, sterile. I mean, you can use it for some time and then it's going to die. It will not give offsprings. So we said interbreeding. Interbreeding alone is enough? It's not enough, right? Some species are going to reproduce asexually, like bacteria, for example. So they are reproducing. So you will say, okay, they live in the same habitat, they can reproduce, but this is asexual reproduction. So it's just one bacteria without a need of male and female. It just will produce another bacteria. Okay? So they still count as different species. Now I told you that eastern and western meadowlark, are these two same species? No. Why? Because they do not interbreed. They do not interbreed. If you get a male and female and put them together forever, it's not going to happen. Okay? There will be no sexual interaction between them. Why is that? We call that reproductive barrier. Reproductive barrier. Okay? They cannot sexually interact for some reason. There are different reasons, but they will not be able to sexually interact in a way anyway. So we call that they cannot interbreed. In this case, it's for a reason. What's the reason in this case? It is reproductive barrier. They cannot interact. Reproductive barrier. There are different types of the reproductive barriers. So if you ask like why they cannot interbreed, why they cannot sexually interact with each other, this is male and this is female, there are different reasons. Number one is behavioral isolation. So if these are two different types or different species, they have behavioral differences, like they hate each other. They can't come close. This is not anatomical, okay? It's not because of size or shape or something. It's just behavioral thing. They do not like to interact with each other simply, okay? This is one. The other thing is, you're asking yourself now, why they do not interbreed? And we call it reproductive barrier. Different types of reproductive barrier. Behavior is number one. Number two, mating time. Like maybe frogs, they can only interbreed during the spring, for example, and other species, whatever it is, they only interbreed during the fall. So can those two come close to each other? Do you get the idea? No, they will not. Why? Because the mating time is different. Okay, and it happened. They only come close to each other at certain time, not the whole year long. So if the time for this and that are different, this is another reproductive barrier. Habitat isolation. This is living in the high mountains, and this is entire life. This is their habitat. Living in the high mountain, and this is living in the desert or something. They will not come close to each other because of the habitat isolation. Mechanical incompatibility, meaning they are anatomically incompatible. Okay, like the anatomy of the male does not fit, the anatomy of the male of this species does not fit with the anatomy of the female of that species. So the male reproductive organ does not fit with the female reproductive organ of those two. So this is called mechanical incompatibility. These are important things that you need to remember, okay? And that's why I'm explaining in details. The other thing is gamete incompatibility, meaning there is no mechanical issue. Like the male organ of this species and the female organ of the other species, it's okay. It fits together. But the gametes are not compatible, right? Even if they have sexual interaction with each other, this sperm cannot penetrate this ovum, okay? And we call that gametes. What's gamete means? Eggs and sperms, both of them. It's like an umbrella to describe both of them, sperms or eggs. Okay, this sperm will never be able to fertilize this egg. That's it. Okay, so they will not fertilize each other. Zygote will never be produced. It's called the gamete or gametic incompatibility. The next one is hybrid weakness. This is what I just mentioned. Hybrid is something like liger and mule. This is called hybrid, right? You get hybrid of two species. Are we following so far? Are we all following? So hybrid is something like mule. Is a mule a hybrid? It's not a species. It was only donkeys and only horses, but you put them together artificially and you put them close to each other and they started to interbreed, and you're producing a hybrid. This hybrid is too weak to give offsprings, so it will not continue. And a lot of times it's even sterile, either weak or sterile. Sometimes maybe it can give one offspring and then disappear, or most of the time it's completely infertile. Same for the hybrid liger. Okay, so what's the issue of the liger? Very weak to reproduce, or completely infertile. Okay, infertility. Infertility is the inability to achieve fertilization, okay, because of any reason. So there are different reasons or different things that can support the evidence of evolution. If you studied, you should be able to tell some of these that support the evidence of evolution. Does anybody remember anything? Did you study? What supported the evolution? Fossils is one. What else? Biogeography, yes. Biogeography is another one. Comparative anatomy, yes. This is three, but there are more than that. But it's good, but you have more than that. All of this, there are a lot of evidences. This is three of them. Now we will come to the taxonomy. Taxonomy means giving names, naming. Okay? So, like if you ask yourself, we say lions and tigers and fish and stuff like that, but this is not the scientific name. The scientific name consists of two parts. Are we following? We call that taxonomy. Taxonomy is naming, the science of naming, the science of giving name to different things. How to make taxonomy, or how did they give these names? Okay, they call it the taxonomy or the taxonomic hierarchy. It consists of genera and species. Do you remember this cascade, starting from life to domain, kingdom, and so on? What are the last two, if you still remember? Genera and species. These are the last two. Okay, this is where the name came from. So when they started to put names for these organisms, I'm saying organisms mean whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be animals, anything. If you wanted to give a names, you go with the last two parts, okay, which is the genera and the species, okay? And we call that taxonomic hierarchy or taxonomy. So if you look at this, like life, either anything in life, any organism, is either prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And then you have the domains. So life followed by domains. Domain from the prokaryotes. You have domain bacteria, you have domain archaea. And then you have domain Eukarya. You need to know this. Domain Eukarya. Domain Eukarya is all of this. Animal. We did this before. Do you guys still remember this? We did it before. Animals is as a kingdom. So within the domain we have different kingdoms. The animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the fungus kingdom, the protist kingdoms, different kingdoms. So protists, this is a multiple kingdoms. Anything that does not fall under those three: plant, animal, fungus. Plant, animal, fungus. These are the three big kingdoms. Anything that's not one of those and it's still Eukarya, you call it protist. Protist. Are we okay? Did you get life followed by domain followed by kingdom? Is that clear? Life, domain, kingdom. And here you have domains like bacteria, archaea, and Eukarya. You have three domains. Those first two domains, they are prokaryotes. Do we still remember what prokaryote means? Prokaryote? Does it have a real nucleus? No. Just genetic material, right? It's not a real nucleus. It's not a membrane. Does not have a nuclear membrane. Okay, so those two domains, they fall under prokaryotes. The third domain, which is the big one, which is Eukarya, it falls under the eukaryotes. So it does have a nucleus. And you have 1, 2, 3, and protist is the rest of the kingdoms. Okay, so we call it kingdom Plantae, kingdom Fungi, kingdom Animalia. Kingdom Plantae, Fungi, and Animalia. This is everybody is accepting those kingdoms, three kingdoms. Everybody agree on it. But the rest, there is a discussion about it, so they put everything else as a protist without going through the details. Okay? So we have three kingdoms that everybody agree on. Kingdom Plantae, kingdom Fungus or Fungi, and Animalia. Other than that, any other kingdom, whatever it is a protist. And here's what we did before. You need to know it. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Genus and species. And where the name came from? Genus and species. Okay? Genus and species. If you wanted to put any name, like look at any one of those two names, two parts, those two parts together are the genus and the species. Okay? Like this is called Pantheria tiger. What's Pantheria or Panthera? Is the genus or the species? This is the genus and the tiger is the species. Okay? And so on. Did you get now how we give the names? Every name will consist of two parts. First part and second part. First part is a genus, the second part is a species. Can you read it now? If I give you two names, do you know which one is the genus and which one is the species? Like this. Panthera tiger. Panthera is the genus. Tiger, species. Okay? And so on. So it goes down like this until you get to the last part. You have an individual organism. This individual organism will have a name that consists of two parts. The first part is genus and the second part is the species. So for this reason we call the name of the taxonomy, we call it binomial. What's bi? Two. Nomial means name. So it's two components. The name is two components. This is called a scientific name. Like Panthera tigris. Panthera, I mentioned it. Genus and tigris is the species. Okay?